I have 7 o'clock. We'll go ahead and start the meeting for the Raymore City Council work session for Monday, April the 15th. Hopefully you guys have run to the post office and got your tax papers. That's true, you do have midnight, don't you? Well, this meeting might go to midnight. You never know. Because first item on the agenda tonight is Memorandum of Understanding regarding annexation. I'll turn it over to Mr. Fearborn.
Mr. Henry, if you'll come on up. This will be a two-part presentation. Mr. Henry is good. You have the drafts, our initial drafts of the MOU. Mr. Henry is going to address the technical aspects of that, and then I will be updating the council on recommended next steps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Before you have two memorandums of understanding as contemplated in the previous conversations we've had, one between the city of Lee's Summit and the city of Raymore, and one between the city of Winnebago, Lake Winnebago and the city of Raymore. And both of these memorandums are intended to establish an agreement between the cities. I call it an intergovernmental agreement that says that the current city boundaries of Lee's Summit and the current city boundaries of Lake Winnebago will remain the same, but they will not annex into our intended area of annexation as we passed in Resolution 1915 that shows our intended boundaries and to evolve through annexation. So both of these agreements were kept relatively short on purpose because we didn't want to cloud the issue and wanted to be very narrowly tailored and specific as to our asks. And so both of them will contemplate, as you can see, that we show what the existing city boundaries are for both cities in the Exhibit A, and Exhibit B shows it basically is a copy of the signed ordinance 1915 or Resolution 1915 for our intended future boundaries. As you move through the agreement, you'll find that the first covenant by the city opposite Raymore, whether it be Lee's Summit or Winnebago, they have an A and a B, and the first is that they will not extend their southern borders or east or towards the city of Raymore, depending on which city it is, and then the B that they will not challenge any annexation that we do judicially or otherwise. And so it protects both our interests by ensuring that the city does not move its boundaries into our intended area, and it also ensures that they will not challenge any annexation that we attempt to take, because the idea how we evolve this idea is that through the intended city boundaries we will do those in pieces of annexation, and so it will not be all at once. And so in order to ensure that we do that and make sure that nobody challenges it, that's how we have that covenanted. We covenant that we will follow the law for as it pertains to annexation, and particularly with the city of Lake Winnebago, we wanted to ensure that our intent is to extend the city of Raymore's boundaries to 291 south, but no further east. And so that leaves that area for the city of Lake Winnebago to extend south as far as they want on the east side. And that's what this agreement contemplates, and that's the biggest concern and the biggest driver behind that. So both agreements are relatively straightforward. We have in there a initial 5-year term, and it renews every 5 years. It is open to amendment at that time, and so you're able to amend the agreement as necessary. So that kind of avoids the ever-present concern of bounding future councils. That kind of is how you allow that to evolve. We put that in 5-year windows just to make sure that there's enough time for us to get the study area done and some other things that the city may need to do in the meantime. But at this time, I'm happy to answer any questions about the MOU that you might have or any specifics that you might want to address.
Anybody? No, go ahead, Jay.
You talked about the area to the east of 291 and that we were not going to pursue that.
Yes, sir.
Does Lake Winnebago have an intent to annex that on their own now, or is that just Wild West?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Not that I'm aware of. At this time, I've looked. I did look when we initially actually started this project. I looked to see if I could find anything in there in a comprehensive plan or anything like that, and I did not see any intent to move that direction. The only thing I can say is that they have annexed a big portion of 291 South,
yes,
almost to 58, at the intersection of 58 Highway and 291 South. And so with that annexation, I anticipated it just as kind of a logical connection that they may try to move down. And so the purpose of that MOU, and as you point out, is us to try to go to 291. And it really, as I understand it, there's not even a desire of this city to annex any portion of 291. We just want to get to that eastern western boundary, depending on how you look at it.
Just to follow up on that, Jay, I did have a private conversation with Mayor Sharfin, and he's excited about what our intentions are and getting together and kind of laying it out on paper, and I don't think there's going to be any kind of a problem with that. I don't think they had any intent as of yet or any filed intent. I think they've kind of thought about it with the expansion of the lake and the roads that they've got going to the south there, of potentially going a little bit further south, but I don't think they have anything officially written up yet.
Just curious.
Yeah. And did you have something, Mr. Barber?
Yeah, thank you. Just for my benefit, they have to accept this for this to be binding, and then how binding, legally binding is this MOU?
Yes, sir. So I'll answer that. And the MOU sound in contract. It is essentially a contract between both cities, and so it's going to have the binding effect of any contract that you would enter into at any time. The reason it's called a memorandum of understanding is it's somewhere between a hard and fast contract for services and a handshake agreement, for lack of a better word. But it does carry the full force and effect of a contract if it's litigated. They do have to agree to it. Of course, their city councils, respectively, our Board of Aldermen. I think Lake Winnebago is a fourth-class city. Will have to approve the agreement, and it is anticipated that they'll probably have some suggested revisions to these agreements, which we anticipate. But I don't think, in understanding, looking at Lee Summit's annexations, they certainly don't appear to have any desire to move further south. So I don't anticipate a lot of pushback on that. And Winnebago, I think there's been conversations between the cities that seem to agree that, if we stay on our side, they'll stay on their side, kind of thought, while cordial. But to answer your bigger question, it is a contract, and will be litigated that way if for some reason it were to go to the courts. That's how they look at it.
Yes, Mr. Berenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to readdress the issue with not crossing 291 and going to the east side of that. Obviously, in the next 5 years, that's not anything we would be ready to look at or annex, but I also don't know that we should box ourselves in a corner by committing that we would not annex that. I wonder if it'd be better for us to pick a north-south boundary line on the east side, whether it be 58 Highway or something south of that, instead of committing ourselves to not annex anything east of 291. Or is that something we just redraw in 5 years and renegotiate?
I'd be, Mr. Freeborn, if I may. So I certainly understand the point, and I think that right now we were drafting this with the idea that we have just our intent to annex area that we had done via resolution, and I think as you're referring to it, you're more southeast corner, for lack of a better word, of intersection of 58 and 291, and picking in a line on the east side that we wouldn't annex north of. That's certainly something you could do via another resolution of an intent to annex or something of that notion. But
we would also have to withdraw Resolution 1915 because we've already established the boundaries relative to this process.
And there's also, and you would need to do that, just to piggyback, because of the 15% requirement that any annexation touch and concern the existing city boundaries by 15%. In order to ensure we do that, we'd have to withdraw 1915 and pass a new resolution, which is certainly the purview of the council. But at this time, that's how we contemplated it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The conversation just when I answer my question with regard to the Exhibit A and the map. That was the map that's included in Resolution 1915 is the Exhibit A that is discussed in this MOU?
That is correct, sir.
Excellent, thank you. And then as far as kind of along Mr. Berensden's line of questioning, during this 5-year period, and should it get renewed and continue on for an additional 5 years, how does the discussion move forward with existing development concerns that are in place with, I guess, Lee Summit or infrastructure that's kind of in this intent to annex area that are in the works? Who gets discussion, or if there's any? I'm not saying there's anything.
We have no discussions with Lee Summit relative to any sort of shared infrastructure at this time. Okay.
So if, for instance, if a outside developer not from this area decides to see some interest in a particular area within this intent to annex area, who do they seek conversation with first?
Until we annex, they'd be going to the county.
They go to the county? Okay.
Yeah, and depending upon which tract of property that is, we do have control over some of that sewer system that does carry through some of those areas like Dykeland, who we have entered into an agreement with to take care of their lift station, isn't it? Is it the lift station or the line that?
Lift station, sir.
Yeah, and then the school, obviously, and that all goes to Middle Big Creek, which is the Pleasant Hill facility. But that the county is part of the Middle Big Creek project as well. So it just depends on if that ties into our lines and the agreements that would have to come down for that. That's for the sewer. For the water, you've got the private water out there. Any other infrastructure the county would have to authorize.
So this MOU would prompt county to have a discussion with our departments?
No, sir. The only purpose, this MOU is to block them and legally block them from coming down, because we do have the intent to annex area. If they ever change their mind from what they've told us verbally, councils change over. I think it would be more than likely to be Winnebago than it would be Lee Summit, because Lee Summit's entire council and their city manager are adamant that they're not interested. But if they would ever change their mind, just coming into an intent to annex area does not have, we would not have nearly the same legal challenge to them doing that as we would with the MOU in place. So that's the whole purpose of this first step, is to, in essence, lock up our intent to annex area with nobody being able to encroach at any point in time.
I understand. Okay, thank you. Then could you put in layman's terms for me, paragraph 2.3, when it speaks to, we will initiate annexation procedures to annex territories for Raymore growth areas whenever orderly planned development reasonably dictates that the land should be developed in the city of Raymore, or when the sole discretion of the city council of the city of Raymore is appropriate and necessary to annex such areas.
Yes, sir. And it's a good point. So that's a little bit of a long-winded paragraph. So what I envisioned is exactly what you had actually contemplated. If a developer wants to come in and begin a development, that is an immediate response. That would allow an immediate response by the Raymore City Council to say, okay, let's go ahead and start our annexation procedure in this area so that we can make sure that we capture that development. Additionally, I want the option to be there for the council, even if there's not a developer, if it's just the right time to start one of the annex pieces, that you're able to do that at that time without any encumbrances in place, without anything blocking you from doing that. And so the first portion is exactly what you had contemplated. If a developer says, hey, let's build X development here, it allows you for immediate to initiate the procedure for annexation. And because an intent to annex area is not legally binding, it's a resolution, and the courts have actually interpreted that as not. I mean, it's just, all it is putting people on notice that eventually the city would like to annex that area. It actually requires an ordinance to start the process, and whatever city passes the ordinance first is the one who will actually have claim on the annexation, on an involuntary annexation. So the reason that paragraph is drafted that way is exactly what you had described.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Freeman.
Of course, again, Corey, that if that development were not contiguous to any existing incorporated areas of Raymore, we would not be able to pursue annexation even voluntarily because of the contiguousness of that. Now, if it were contiguous to a portion that is Raymore, then that voluntary annexation for a new development could take place.
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. That is exactly right.
Even though an area might fall within the intended area, unless it's contiguous at the time to the incorporated area.
Correct. And so so let's say that the development comes up closer to 58 Highway, so you're way outside of the city limits. We'd have to get a boundary that would touch 15% and go that far out, and that would be a difficult process. And so you're exactly right. That's the concern. So voluntary annexation can certainly happen as long as it's touching and concerning, and that contiguous is unfortunately well litigated. So
yeah, because we don't have that 15% now with the school district, and they would like to be a part of the city limits.
Correct. And so that's why, and I think that at one point Mr. Fearborn had indicated that the first annexation attempt we're going to do is probably on the 58 corridor, as long as we meet that contiguous requirement to allow that school district to be able to voluntarily annex in if that's how that works, or at least capture the school district.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Circo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was told years back, now the church has a property on that northwest corner, and they're looking to buy and rechange it to the southwest corner. But they told me years back that they'd already put water, sewers, they'd paid. Did they ever complete that extension out to that land?
Water's already always been there
Okay,
through the district, not through us.
Okay.
Through District 3. The sewer is the Alexander Creek sewer line.
Okay.
And the school put that in.
Okay.
And there is a buyout agreement over time, and we send all the property owners once a year a letter reminding them that if they ever sell their property or begin to develop their property, here's the process that'll be followed.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Fearborn?
My portion of this, just real quick, with the council's thumbs up, we kind of strategized because Winnebago's a lot smaller than Lee Summit, and our approach is to go to their mayor because he's kind of runs the business of that particular city. We would have two different teams, one to go to Lee Summit and one to go to Winnebago, and approach them with this and sit down at the table and talk with them about it, get that feedback from them, see what the next steps would be, then come back and report to the council on the new timeline. But we would actually like to approach them, and Steve Arbo with Lee Summit has actually called me twice now to ask when he's going to see the draft of this, so they're very anxious there. Team Lake Winnebago would be Mayor Turnbow, myself, Mr. Cataret, Mike Eakey, and Jonathan Zur, a little bit smaller group. Team Lee Summit would be Christine Bushyhead, Corey Henry, myself, Mr. Cataret, Mr. Eakey, and Mr. Zur. It'd be a little bit. And if there's the possibility that Steve might bring his public works director to that meeting, there's a lot of those kind of conversations that take place with this as far as infrastructure is concerned. If that's the case, then Mr. Crass would be joining us on that team. If the council's okay with that, we will proceed with those notifications next week. Great.
Consensus here. Yep. All right. Great. Thank you, Corey. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Have a good night.
We'll move on to item B of the agenda, which is the code review update and timeline. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just wanted to very, very quickly update you on where we're at with the code review, which is now entering its second year on the part of staff. It has been daunting, but we finished the first pass. We are now going through and doing some real minor tweaks that we had noted, and from things that had come up during the course of the many months that we've been doing this, where it's actually been enough time that we want to make some additional changes to it, but it's going to be rushing at us very quickly. If the council is okay with this particular timeline, what I would like to do on the first of each of the months that we look at it, I would like to bring to the council, literally on the first, mail you all 2 copies. One would be, the red line copy of this thing is a nightmare to try to read through. There's comments everywhere, there's strike-throughs, there's the new code will be much pared back. We were probably able to eliminate at least 200 pages of Mr. Zur's type language. There will no longer be any heretofores or therewiths or any of those in there. We've gone with a much more literal translation in spots where we absolutely mirrored state statute. We referenced state statute instead of printing out 2 pages worth. Those were a majority of the changes that we made to code. There were some interpretive items that you'll be able to see, but what I thought I would do is we'd do it by section, starting with section 1 and just walking through it. And I would give you, just like we did with the administrative policy manual, here's the old Title 1, here is the new Title 1 of the code, and take a look at them. And then give you until the second work session in each of the next several months, and we can talk to it and answer any of your questions at that second work session. That'll give you about 3 weeks. each time to review that section of code. And I would probably encourage, similar to the way a lot of the council approached the administrative policy manual, use the old code for reference if you have questions, but look at the new code and make the decision on whether you like that. Kind of have that be your frame of reference rather than clouding the issue and overcomplicating the issue, because it's going to be really complicated anyway. And that's where we're at, if you're okay with that. Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, I've walked in those review code meetings and walked right back out.
They've been tense.
Or code review meetings. Anyway, so we had last item is item C, the winter weather-related budget amendments. I see you have some facts and figures here for us.
Thank you, sir. As the council will remember, I came to you a few weeks back letting you know that in several operating codes in the general fund, we had significantly exceeded the budgeted amounts with this incredible winter weather that we had. The total actually came to $118,866 in expense overages. That's over and above what we budgeted. In addition, we have a significant revenue issue that I am fighting, but I am not certain of how our meeting with former Kansas City Council member Cindy Circo is going to go here in the next couple of weeks. She's willing to sit. She is a representative for KCP&L, and she's going to sit down and talk with us about this particular situation. What happened with the KCP&L issue, to start out, at the end of summer, because of their rate increases, pretty much everybody who had KCP&L as a provider began to hate them. To make up for that hatred, they received a tax break from the federal government. And they decided in this first year of the corporate tax break that they would turn those funds over to their customers in the form of a credit. So you may have all noticed that your bill for January that you got in February was significantly decreased. The problem with that is we don't collect our sales tax, our license tax from them because of that reduction. It is my belief that gross sales include the actual sales, not what they have credited out, and therefore we should have received that nearly $40,000 or more than $40,000 from that company, because the technical definition for gross sales is just that. And in fact, a little bit more. It's any income that you might make off of those sales. So, Gross receipts. Gross receipts, thank you. Yes, gross receipts. So we're going to meet with them. I'm not sure of the success that we will have. We're hoping to do it not only for us, but for all the cities that got this particular item applied to them, as far as the franchise tax is concerned. So stay tuned on that. But that leads to the expense decreases combined with the revenue. I've given the council 3 scenarios relative to that particular item. Scenario 1 is to hit each of the departments with non-citizen service, non-professional development, non-personnel expense decreases. And I left it to the department heads to come back to me with suggestions on those. And you can see what each of the departments did. Primarily what you see in most of the departments is small reductions relative to, as an example, in the administration department. Mr. Eakey and I were scheduled to go to 2 conferences this year, but we only need 1 conference for our certification points. We were scheduled to go to ICMA, which we're still scheduled for. We were scheduled to go to GFOA, which was more of an enhancement So if we cancel GFOA, obviously we can decrease that expense. The two big ones that you see in there are IT at $60,913 and the police department at $43,440. I'm going to let Chief, would you mind if I put you on the spot and had you talk with them about? There are two large expenses in the IT department. There's a $50,000 expense. And I'll just let Chief talk to you about it.
Well, I feel obligated to let you talk, but I'm looking at scenario number 3, and it seems like the simplest here, but go ahead, Chief.
So I'm sorry, sir, as I was hobbling over here, which one did you want me to address?
The IT, well, I can do the IT if you'll do the PD. What we're reducing in PD, the
Scenario
large
number
ticket
1.
item, the what's it called?
Cellbrite.
Cellbrite, thank you.
Cellbrite, and also our conversion, and is that included in that number, sir, the 43,000, the conversion to mules?
Right.
Okay. We are going to, as a matter of fact, we've, not actual mules.
Tremendous fleet savings.
We're not going to get there as quick, but we'll save a lot of money. The conversion, Kansas City had made the decision, the Kansas City Police Department had made the decision to migrate away from the system that we all use called Regis. We all went to Regis when Kansas City went several years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, and now they have made the decision to migrate away from Regis. The problem for smaller agencies like ours is that information sharing and not being able to see the information that those other agencies have, like warrants and things like that. So when Kansas City several months ago, near the end of last year, had made the decision that they were going to convert from Regis, which is housed on the other side of the state, to MULES, which is the Missouri Uniform Law Enforcement System that captures that data. The rest of the agencies, here and others, on both sides of the state line, had decided, we need to make decisions about converting additionally away from Regis. It's going to save us a lot of money. So, I mean, the obvious benefit, of course, is that shared data, between, in the MULE system between agencies like Kansas City and others. But also the money that it's going to save us. And MULES is actually a system that's operated by the Highway Patrol. So it is shared data, and all of our all of our information had been going into the MULES system anyway, so the conversion will be really easy for us and others. And the Kansas City information was all going into MULES as well, so it'll be very simple for us to make that conversion.
So that's one of those that you love, and there's going to be another one like this because we can say that the departments really racked their brains and came up with these savings, but this was being thrust on us anyway, so we were going to have to do it and get the savings.
Yeah, we were doing that. I wish we were going to experience the same savings that the Kansas City Police Department's saving close to $1 million with their conversion from Regis to MULES. And then the other savings was the Cellbrite system, which was actually the data extraction, plug a cell phone into it and it would extract the data from the cell phone that you all had approved with year-end funds with this at the end of the fiscal year. We just felt like, obviously, it's a very nice tool. We still have access to Cellbrite with the other folks that have it here in the area. So it's not something that we might not look at somewhere down the line, but we felt like that was something that could at least be delayed for the time being.
And then the so that's 43,440 of that amount that you see under PD in the memo. As far as IT is concerned, of the 60,913, 50,000 of it is actually in one fell swoop, and it is again just like the conversion to MULES. It's one of those things that was going to happen anyway. So we were going to be letting the council know that we weren't going. This is where we were putting into the restricted revenue fund $5,000 or $50,000 for $5,000 payments for encryption in the court over a period of 10 years. We're not going to be able to do that. Some changes and some fines, some changes in the court system and some fines, D, in the state statute associated with the courts is going to prohibit us from being able to do that.
There was going to be significant additional cost for the encryption based on that information being housed on American soil. And when we converted to Google several years ago, CGIS is now saying, and of course those are federal guidelines, CGIS is now saying that we would have to pay in order to have a version of Google that housed that on American soil, and Google's just not willing to do that without a lot of money associated with it. So those are changes in federal guidelines that we just didn't have any control over.
Thank you, Chief. Sorry to put you on the spot. Scenario 2 involves using, short form involves using the logical capital funds that would be associated with transfers into the operational funds, primarily the transportation fund. And you can see if we made the transfers, what the fund balance would still be in those. Scenario 3 involves similar to what the council does each year, utilizing available fund balance and transferring it up into those expense accounts as a counter expense as far as an accounting entry is concerned. I am recommending to the council that we utilize scenario 1. The simplest form I can say is you should never try to offset unexpected operational costs with capital funds or a bailout from the fund balance. Tempting though that may be, we may need those for something else, and most probably will in this particular year, that is more suited to using those funds than this. Even if you didn't, I think that this was, and to be real honest, our folks always step up to the plate. It was, they not only came into me with, most of them had spreadsheets when they walked in. I gave them a week to think about it, gave them another week after that to consider it, and then we sat down and met with each of them one at a time, and everybody had something to offer. So really, really proud of the team and really hope you take my recommendation. That concludes staff report, sir.
Any questions? Everybody give us scenario 1.
I will be bringing budget amendments. Because these are don't spend it's, I can wait now to the end of the year to bring the budget amendments. Everybody knows just don't spend it. And if they don't, then we'll be good.
So that will be an amendment that with potentially other amendments that could come toward the end of the year like is historically the case. Mr. Circo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, after reading over this, I talked with Mr. Fairborn. 1, to me, is the best scenario. 2 is definitely a no-go scenario. It's something you would never want to do. Rob Peter paid Paul on the pretense you can get it back, but you never know. Again, scenario 3 is you have an overabundance of funds, draw from that, but then if you get in a situation, then you're tied up, you don't have anything. I wouldn't want to do that either. So I think scenario 1 would be the perfect way to go.
And I think I saw a thumbs up from most nods. Okay. All right.
Thank you, sir.
So that concludes the official 3 items on the agenda. We always leave an open spot for other. Did you have anything? Okay. Do you have anything else?
Thank you, sir. I wanted to alert the council to a situation that most of you are aware of. We get a lot of complaints about Willow Wind Shopping Center. We get a lot of complaints about Willow Wind Shopping. And the council has made comment on numerous occasions. And you'll remember the issue clouded our first community conversation and our second community conversation that the condition of the center actually entered in. Recently, another very poor attempt at repairing the parking lot was done. You may have noticed that Calico Inc. is no longer in there. They pulled out overnight. Their sign actually that they had been begging the landlord to secure because it wasn't secured actually fell during business hours could have hurt someone. They have exposed wiring in the building. That is what we've heard from them. City code allows the Development Services Department, our code inspectors and our building inspectors, every 5 years to go into buildings and inspect them. In the interest of not being arbitrary and capricious, even though this one deserves it, it is probably a good idea if we go into businesses every 5 years to make sure that it's a safe environment, not from the standpoint of approaching the tenant, but from the standpoint of approaching the landlord on structural health and safety issues relative to those buildings. I've directed community service to start that process because we know the condition of the outside of Willow Wind and some of the structural on the building is bad. We have to believe, based on that and complaints we have received from the tenants up there, that the inside could have significant code violations that are serious safety issues. We know numerous tenants are complaining about the roof leaking. We can see that the roof is leaking. So we are, unless I hear differently from the council, an adamant no, we are going to be sending to the landlord and to each of the tenants this week a letter letting them know that beginning May 1st, the fire department and our building inspector will be going through, inviting them to, as the letter ends, if you have a preferred time and date for your inspection, please call the Development Services Office at or contact Raymore Building Official John Warner. Ultimately, our goal is to ensure that the building, not your business, is structurally sound and meets or exceeds code requirements. If you would like to speak with me about your tenant space before your inspection, which a lot of them already have, I encourage you to give me a call at any time. We wanted to keep it light. You know, this isn't us coming in there, and it certainly has nothing to do with the tenant. We want them to understand that. If the council is okay, we'd like to start that process this week, and then we'll move west. And any building that we haven't been in the last 5 years, we'll send them a similar letter. We'll send one to the landlord letting them know. For the most part, what we hope to do is have these inspections not, unless somebody is just egregiously causing a health or safety item, we would prefer that we would be giving them, and I have directed Mr. Warner, we're giving them advice. Here's what you need to be doing to get up to code. There's not going to be a notice of violation. There's not going to be a citation, except in this case, it is so egregious and so bad. And I mean, people have broken ankles, you know, falling into holes in that parking lot up there, and we get the complaints. This one, we'll be issuing notices of violations and citations.
Mr. Ullman.
I concur with Mr. Fearborn's comments, conclusions, and solution. I received a complaint this last week from another business that leases space along 58 on the north side of 58, out of town owners, I believe, and condition of the parking lot as well as the sidewalks and the ADA ramp are badly deteriorated. And I did make the call. I've notified Mr. Fearborn. I also called Mr. Cataret. I know our inspector did go over, but it's another scenario where we probably need to go in and look at things and give them the lowdown and let them know, hey, this stuff's got to be taken care of.
Mr. Sirko.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can actually speak from experience. I was a tenant there 15 years. I had multiple meetings with the owners over those years and actually put a group of all the renters and tenants together, and I led that for years, trying to get stuff fixed and taken care of. And I've been in most of those buildings with the shop owners over the years, and I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I brought to them. There's a lot of wiring that's just put together without any tape or electrical screws, nuts. You would not believe some of the stuff the roofs have leaked since I was there 15 years, and they would just come in with these crews. And when you talk to the crews, they were guys just, off the street, they weren't really professionals in that field. So to be up there trying to patch something and it didn't work, and we'd have every year, I had to replace my tiles. My tiles would cave in, could fall on my customers. I had one night the alarm go off because the water caved in on my alarm system, set it off. I mean, but we had a lot of that while I was there 15 years. And I meant, like I said, many times that I try to complain, I mean, the front facings are falling off, the bricks are falling off. I mean, you can walk by there and bricks will just fall on kids or anything. And they never wanted to do that. And we begged them, and they wanted to try to make the actual tenants pick up the cams for the parking lot and there, and we did not accept that. We would not accept that. But it's always been a real tight touch and go grind and a battle. And so I've been in a lot of those battles with that particular place for many years, so I could tell from experience it does need to be resolved, as there's a lot of things going on up there that are really safety issues. Stuff's breaking off, chipping off, the leaking, the wiring. It's you can go up inside those things above where you can walk above you on those vaults, and they've got loose wiring in there, and it's just they makeshift wiring. It's crazy up there. It really is. So I think Mr. Fearborn, the city has a great plan. We need to resolve that before something really drastically happens. It's bad, and I know the city gets all the weight from the people. They think they can do something about it, but it's the owners of the property, and it's not the city. So,
yeah, and I know that we're not acting out of precedence either, because our codes enforcement has been somewhat complaint-based in the past, and because our complaints are beginning to add up, at reacting on that. But you said moving west from there. Were you not concerned east, because that's an aging buildings and infrastructure as you go down through Pine Street and those small units along there, that as you move on around the corner there might be
as long as we just keep the process going, we can go either direction.
Right. Okay. I just don't want to look like we're picking on one person when there probably are other areas in our community. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And that was my question too. If we start there and go west, then do we circle back around and do the other side? And just curious, how long do we think that will take? Is this going to end up every 5 years? We just inspect them all, except on a complaint-based process, or would it make more sense to kind of maybe even divide 1 year Ward 1, next year Ward 2, next year Ward 3, Ward 4, to have a system for doing those inspections, whether it's everybody every 5 years or a process a little bit every year?
I think we'd like to get to everybody every 5 years and then just start it right back over. And eventually, this is our first time doing this, so we'll get a process in place, I'm sure.
And so how much time do you think that'll take? How long will it take to get through everybody?
This is going
ideas?
to be, we have no idea.
Okay, just curious.
No idea. This will give us a good baseline, because I would imagine no one is as bad as this. So this actually kind of started, if Mr. Zur is smiling down here, it's because I made him panic, because I called in Mr. Hickey and Mr. Zur and Jim Cataret, and announced to all three of them that I was going to be issuing an order to have the center closed immediately the next morning. Long pause. Mr. Zur was on the conference call, long pause, and he goes, "That's an incredibly bad idea." And for him to go to that length with me, I knew it must be an incredibly bad idea. But it was a conversation starter.
Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I support this. I believe it's really long overdue. Though I will say, Mr. Circo may have saved you a trip. I don't know if you play this meeting back. I think you just take some notes. You might not have to go over there, but I would also advise too, you might look in the parking lot. There might be some missing cars or bicycles in that as well. So, thank you.
Mr. Berg, did you have something? No. Hey, God, no, okay. Yeah, Mr.
Thank you. Mr. Fearborn, I think that's a great idea, because that particular shopping center, I think, is, I've heard a few complaints for a lot of years. My question is, in the letter that you're sending out, specifically to landlords, and I know you're wanting to, keep everything civil and
to tenants.
To who? Tenants? Did you say tenants and landlords? I'm sorry.
Well, we will, after we have sent the tenants the letter, we will send the landlord. We will let him know as a courtesy that we're going to be in his building.
So my question was, you're talking about, okay, here's our advice on what you need to do. Is there any thought to putting deadlines, and here's what happens if things don't get done? I found in the past that sometimes if teeth aren't involved, people don't tend to respond as quickly as they should. And given the history of the particular area we're talking about, we should probably have something in there, I would think, to encourage them to get it done.
The landlord, the tenants, so that they don't feel like we're paying, oh, well, we let them come in, and all of a sudden, the tenants, were just simply going to be giving them recommendations. The landlord is actually going to get notice of violation, date that it has to be remediated, date we're going to reinspect, and what's going to happen to him if he doesn't do it.
Perfect. Thank you.
The other thing I should probably alert the, you're looking nervous. The other thing I should probably alert the council to is there is, I'm going to be real careful, there is a significant possibility that a very heavy-hitting developer is looking at this center at the exact same time, which I did not know about when we started this process. But I don't think it's going to be a wrinkle in it, but just so you all are aware.
Anything else?
I think Mr. Zur has to say something.
Mr. Zur.
I simply want to make sure and point out it's a system and a program that's going to be established, not necessarily solely focused on this particular center, but an overall city evaluation from a 5-year perspective based upon where we have been able to review and inspect prior plans versus where we have not.
Mr. Holman.
Yeah, I'd just like to kind of sum up for understanding the overarching purpose, the very generic for those of us that aren't that sharp, is safety. Safety of customers, safety of business owners, safety of any personnel that traverse in and out via vehicle or foot, whether it is this location or ones to the west or the east. Correct?
Absolutely, sir.
That's all I needed. Thank you, sir.
Anything else? Do you want to bring it up? Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Would the council have an interest in beginning the work sessions at 6:30 instead of 7 o'clock? Not the council meetings. Council meetings are called for time, place, in code, but I find that on many, many occasions, folks are getting here about 25 till, and then everybody's just kind of hanging around waiting for it to start. I don't know what's going on in anybody's home, but if you'd be interested, staff would be able to make that happen.
Just get you out a little sooner through the summer.
Good. We'll try it on a pilot basis through the summer and see how you like it.
Okay.
That will begin with May, with the next one.
Will they call me the first 4 or 5 years?
Call John. I'll text you, buddy.
Send a car over to pick you up.
Mr. Holman.
Just so I don't get in trouble, is next week picture week, Mr. Icky?
I am glad you brought that up. Yes.
So
next week will be picture week for the council. If you would like individual photos, updates, please be here 25, 30 minutes before the meeting. We will do the group photo about 15 minutes before the 7 o'clock council meeting.
On Monday night.
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Abdul.
Just real quick, I want to apologize for my tardiness, but just want to share that I had the opportunity to award $15,000 in scholarships to Belton High School seniors.
Oh, neat. That's awesome.
But I apologize for being late.
It's a fun part of the job.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Sir, I'm giving Mr. Icky time to get to the camera. He forgot.
Oh, okay. All right. So watch
That's
your
all.
language till he's done turning off the cameras. Okay. Thank you. I think we're through.